The Martian sunset painted the sky in shades of crimson when Sarah Chen's life changed forever. As the lead xenobiologist at Olympus Station, she'd spent 3 years studying microbial life in Mars' underground caves. Nothing in her training prepared her for the sight of a burning ship cutting through the planet's thin atmosphere, trailing smoke and debris across the russet landscape. Movement detected in Sector 7, Dr. Chin, the station's AI announced. Impact imminent. Sarah grabbed her emergency kit and sealed her environmental suit. Track it, Arya. Alert medical if needed. The ship crashed 2 kilometers from the station, leaving a burning trench carved into the Martian soil. As Sarah approached in her rover, her sensors detected something unprecedented: multiple heartbeats, none of them matching known terrestrial patterns. The vessel's design was unlike anything humanity had encountered in their limited space exploration. Its organic curves and iridescent hull material spoke of technology far beyond Earth's capabilities. A jagged tear ran along its side, revealing darkened interior chambers. Sarah's hand hesitated over her emergency beacon. Protocol demanded she alert Earth Command immediately. But something made her pause, a sound carrying through her suit's external microphones. A keening cry that struck a chord deep in her human core. It sounded like children weeping. Moving closer, she activated her suit's enhanced vision. Through the tear in the hull, she spotted movement. Small forms huddled together, their bodies covered in soft, luminescent fur that pulsed with fear. Cubs, she realized. Alien young, no larger than human toddlers. Life signs are stable but declining, Arya reported. Detecting severe trauma and environmental stress. Sarah made her decision. Protocol could wait. She'd sworn an oath to preserve and protect life, regardless of its origin. As she prepared to enter the wreck, her sensors screamed a warning. Something massive was entering Mars' atmosphere, a ship at least 10 times the size of the crashed vessel. The cubs' cries intensified. Sarah's translator began picking up fragments. Hunters, coming, help. Through her faceplate, she watched the larger ship descend. Its design was all sharp angles and weapon ports, radiating menace. The Drachnid hunters, she would later learn, were infamous throughout the galaxy for their brutality. They specialized in capturing young aliens for blood sport, teaching their own children to kill by practicing on helpless cubs. Multiple heavily armed life forms detected, Arya warned. Recommend immediate retreat. But Sarah Chin, daughter of Earth, felt something ancient and powerful rise within her. Throughout human history, her species had evolved as community builders, as protectors of the young. It was encoded in their DNA, this fierce drive to shelter the vulnerable, regardless of cost. Arya, seal the rover and prepare emergency medical protocols, she commanded, retrieving a plasma cutter from her kit. And send an encrypted message to Dr. Patel, cubs in danger. Need darkness. Her old friend at the station would understand. They'd spent countless hours exploring Mars' cave systems together. If anyone could buy her time to save these children, it was Patel. As Sarah cut her way into the wreck, the cub's bioluminescence dimmed in fear. She kept her movements slow, remembering her training with endangered Earth species. I won't hurt you, she whispered, though she knew they couldn't understand her words. But perhaps they could understand her intent, her willingness to place herself between them and harm. The first cub she reached was injured, its fur pulsing weakly with distress. Up close, their features were surprisingly delicate: large, expressive eyes, small paws with delicate fingers, and fur that shifted colors like the aurora borealis. This wasn't just an alien species. This was an intelligent, emotionally complex race. And someone was hunting their children. The larger ship was landing now, its engines throwing up storms of red dust. Sarah had minutes, maybe less. She began carefully lifting cubs, 4 in total, into her emergency medical carrier. Their bodies were surprisingly light, adapted perhaps for a lower gravity world. Hostile forces deploying ground units, Arya reported. 90 seconds to intercept. Sarah sealed the carrier and took one last look at the crashed ship. Among the wreckage, she spotted what could only be the cub's caretaker, clearly dead from the impact. She wished she had time for a proper burial, but survival came first. As she emerged from the wreck, the Martian ground trembled. Through the dust storm, she made out massive, armored figures advancing with weapons raised. Their bodies seemed to be a hybrid of organic and mechanical parts, built for efficient killing. But at that moment, all of Olympus Station went dark. Patel had understood her message perfectly. In the sudden blackness, Sarah activated her cave mapping headlamps and ran. Not toward the station, that would endanger everyone there, but toward the maze of lava tubes she'd spent years studying. The cubs huddled silently in their carrier, their fur now completely dark, instinctively hiding their presence. Sarah heard the hunters' frustrated roars behind her as she reached the cave entrance. They were strong, well-armed, and ruthless. But this was her territory, her home. And she had something worth fighting for. As she descended into the darkness, Sarah Chun smiled grimly. The hunters thought they were pursuing weak prey. They were about to learn a lesson about humanity that countless others had learned before. Never threaten a child in the presence of a human. Any child. The galaxy was about to witness what happened when humanity's protective fury was unleashed. Behind her, the hunters began their pursuit, unaware they were following a member of Earth's most dangerous species, a human protecting the young. The darkness of the Martian lava tube swallowed Sarah and her precious cargo as distant roars echoed through the tunnels. The cub's carrier nestled against her back, their combined weight lighter than expected in Mars-reduced gravity. Her headlamp illuminated the rough walls, casting long shadows that danced like ancient spirits. The injured cub stirred weakly, its fur flickering with pulses of pain. Sarah needed to find a safe place to treat them, and quickly. 3 years of mapping these caves hadn't been just for scientific research. She'd discovered chambers that even the station's most sophisticated scanners couldn't penetrate. Something in the rock's mineral composition created natural interference. "Arya, maintain connection as long as possible," she whispered to her suit's AI. "Track hunter movements." Signal degrading, Arya responded. Detecting 12 pursuers, heavily armed. "They're splitting into search teams." Sarah smiled grimly. The hunters might be apex predators, but they were making a classic mistake, dividing their forces in unfamiliar territory. She headed deeper, toward a chamber she'd nicknamed the Sanctuary. It lay behind a narrow fissure that would force the bulky hunters to remove their armor if they wanted to follow. The cubs remained eerily quiet, their natural bioluminescence completely suppressed. Sarah's xenobiologist mind raced with questions about their adaptive capabilities, but survival came first. She reached the fissure and carefully maneuvered through, the carrier barely fitting through the gap. The sanctuary opened before her, a vast chamber with walls that sparkled with embedded crystals. A small underground spring provided water, and the ambient temperature was significantly warmer than the surface. Most importantly, the mineral content in the walls would mask life signs. "Lost contact with station," Arya announced before falling silent. They were truly alone now. Sarah quickly set up her emergency shelter, creating a small pressurized environment where she could safely remove her suit. The cubs watched her with enormous eyes that seemed to shine with their own inner light. As she opened the carrier, she moved slowly, remembering everything she knew about traumatized wildlife. "It's okay, little ones," she murmured. "Let's take care of those injuries." The wounded cub allowed her to approach, its fur rippling with colors she interpreted as uncertainty and pain. Up close, their biology was fascinating. Their fur seemed to function as both a communication system and a defensive mechanism. The injury was a deep gash along its side, probably from the crash. As she cleaned the wound, she noticed something remarkable. The other cubs gathered around, placing their small paws on their injured companion. Their fur began to pulse in synchronized patterns, and to her amazement, the wound began to heal faster than anything she'd seen before. "Collective healing," she whispered, her scientist's mind racing. "You're empathic healers." No wonder the hunters wanted them. A species with natural healing abilities would be priceless on the black market. The thought made her blood boil. She might not be able to communicate fully with the cubs, but she could show them they were safe through actions. Hours passed as Sarah treated their injuries and shared her rations. The cubs proved to be surprisingly adaptable, their digestive systems accepting modified human food without issue. They began to show more of their natural behavior, their fur displaying complex patterns that she started to recognize as emotional expressions. The smallest cub, whom she'd mentally nicknamed Aurora for its particularly vibrant colors, was the first to initiate physical contact. It pressed against her side while she was checking supplies, its fur glowing with what she hoped was trust. Soon, all 4 cubs were huddled around her, their collective bioluminescence casting a gentle light through the chamber. A distant boom echoed through the tunnels. The hunters were getting frustrated, using explosives to try to flesh out their prey. Sarah tensed, but the cave held steady. She'd chosen well. These lava tubes had survived millions of years of Martian geological activity. She needed a plan. The hunters wouldn't give up easily, and her supplies wouldn't last forever. The cubs needed proper nutrition, and eventually, they needed to be reunited with their own kind. But first, they had to survive. Aurora suddenly stiffened, its fur flashing warning patterns. The other cubs immediately went dark. Sarah doused her lamp, listening intently. Heavy footsteps echoed from one of the distant tunnels, accompanied by the hum of energy weapons. Found traces, a harsh voice growled in translated galactic standard. The human female can't hide forever. Sarah reached for her emergency beacon. She'd avoided using it, knowing it would bring more humans into danger. But as she watched the cubs huddle together, their small forms trembling in the darkness, she knew she couldn't face this alone. This was no longer just about survival. This was about justice. About showing the galaxy that humanity wouldn't stand by while children, any children, were hunted for sport. The cubs had started to trust her, and she would die before betraying that trust. She activated the beacon, knowing it would reach Earth's outposts throughout the solar system. But she also knew the hunters would detect it. A calculated risk. The hunters wanted stealth and secrecy. She was about to deny them both. "Arya, if you can still receive," she whispered, "initiate Protocol Phoenix." The cave walls seemed to vibrate with the hunters' approaching footsteps. Sarah gathered the cubs close, their fur now pulsing in sync with her heartbeat. They were learning, adapting, forming a bond that transcended species. She wasn't just their protector now, she was their chosen guardian. In the darkness of Mars' ancient caves, Sarah Chen prepared for war. The hunters were about to learn why humans were considered one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not for their weapons or technology, but for their unshakable determination to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The cubs pressed closer, their combined bioluminescence creating a soft aurora around them. In that gentle light, Sarah saw not alien creatures, but children who needed her. And every human instinct, honed by millions of years of evolution as social protectors, resonated with a single purpose: keep them safe, no matter the cost. The tunnels echoed with the sound of approaching hunters, but Sarah remained steady. Her makeshift shelter, nestled deep within the sanctuary, had become a fortress of desperate hope. The cubs, now more attuned to her presence, responded to her calm demeanor by controlling their bioluminescence, creating only the faintest shimmer in the darkness. The emergency beacon pulsed steadily, sending its signal through Mars' thin atmosphere. Sarah knew help would come, but survival until then meant outsmarting creatures who had spent centuries perfecting the art of hunting. She retrieved her tablet, accessing the detailed maps she'd created of the cave system. "Little ones," she whispered to the cubs, "time for a crash course in human ingenuity." The caves weren't just passages, they were a complex network of chambers, natural chimneys, and underground rivers shaped by ancient Martian volcanism. Sarah had spent years studying them not just as a scientist, but as someone who understood the value of knowing every escape route. Now, that knowledge would become their salvation. A thunderous blast shook the chamber. The hunters were getting closer, using explosives to map the cave system. Aurora, the smallest cub, pressed against Sarah's side, its fur pulsing with fear patterns she'd learned to recognize. The other cubs huddled closer, their collective healing energy creating a subtle warmth. Sarah checked her suit's readings. The hunters' explosives were changing the cave's atmosphere, introducing pockets of various gases. A dangerous game on Mars, where the wrong explosion could collapse entire sections of the cave system. But it also gave her an idea. She had spent years studying Martian geology, understanding how the planet's unique composition could be both deadly and protective. The hunters, for all their advanced technology, were treating these caves like any other hunting ground. That would be their mistake. "Arya," she whispered, hoping her suit's AI could still function in the interference. "Run Simulation Alpha 7. Calculate gas dispersion patterns in the northern tunnels." The AI's response was weak but clear. "Warning, introducing additional oxygen into the system could result in explosive decompression." "Exactly," Sarah smiled grimly. She began gathering supplies, preparing for what would come next. The cubs watched her intently, their fur now pulsing in patterns that mimicked her movements. They were learning, adapting, understanding. Another explosion rocked the caves, closer this time. Sarah could hear the hunters' frustration in their translated communications. The human female is more resourceful than expected. No matter. No prey escapes the Drachnid hunt. Sarah activated her suit's external speakers, her voice echoing through the tunnels. "Fun fact about humans, we're not prey. We're apex predators who chose to become builders instead. But we never lost our hunting instincts." The hunter's response was immediate and violent. Energy weapons scorched the tunnel walls, but Sarah was already moving. She guided the cubs through a narrow passage she'd discovered months ago, one that led to a chamber with a crucial feature, a natural chimney that reached almost to the surface. The cubs moved with surprising agility, their bodies perfectly adapted to the low-gravity environment. They seemed to understand the need for silence, their fur completely dark except for occasional pulses that helped them communicate with each other. Sarah paused at a junction, setting up the first part of her plan. The hunters had brought their advanced technology to Mars, but they didn't understand the planet's peculiarities. They didn't know that the cave's mineral composition could turn their own energy weapons against them. 5 meters to target, a hunter growled nearby. No escape routes detected. Sarah smiled in the darkness. She reached for her suit's atmospheric controls, preparing to execute her plan. The cubs huddled behind her, their trust in her now absolute. She had become their guardian, their protector, and she would show these hunters why threatening children, any children, in the presence of a human was a fatal mistake. "You know what humans are really good at," she called out, her voice echoing through the tunnels. "Understanding chemistry. Like how certain Martian minerals react with concentrated oxygen. Want a demonstration?" She released a controlled burst of oxygen from her suit's reserves, precisely calculated to interact with the mineral deposits she'd studied for years. The reaction was immediate and spectacular. The tunnel erupted in a cascade of crystalline formations, growing at an explosive rate, cutting off the hunters' advance. The hunters' curses translated into multiple languages as they realized their position was compromised. Sarah was already moving, leading the cubs through passages she knew would confuse their pursuers' sensors. She had turned the cave system into a weapon, using her scientific knowledge to create chaos in controlled bursts. But she knew this was just the beginning. The hunters would adapt, would bring more resources to bear. She needed to get the cubs to the surface, to reach help before the hunters' frustration led them to take more drastic measures. Aurora suddenly stopped, its fur pulsing with an urgent pattern. The other cubs responded immediately, their collective bioluminescence creating a map-like pattern on the cave wall. Sarah stared in amazement as she realized what they were showing her. They were mapping the hunters' positions through some sort of biological sonar. "Clever cubs," she whispered proudly. "Very clever indeed." The impromptu light show revealed that the hunters had split into 3 groups, trying to surround their position. But they'd made a critical error. They'd positioned themselves near one of the cave's natural gas pockets, the kind that Sarah had spent years studying and documenting. She reached for her tablet, preparing to put her knowledge to use. The cubs gathered around her, their fur now pulsing in sync with her heartbeat. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were becoming a team. In the darkness of Mars' ancient caves, Sarah Chun prepared to show the galaxy why humans had survived everything their hostile planet had thrown at them. The hunters thought they were facing a simple scientist protecting some alien cubs. They were about to learn they were facing something far more dangerous, a human who had turned an entire planet into her arsenal. The chamber shook with another explosion, but this time Sarah smiled. The hunters were dancing to her tune, their aggressive tactics working against them in the delicate Martian cave system. Her tablet displayed a cascade of sensor readings, pressure changes, gas buildups, structural stresses. Every blast brought them closer to her trap. Aurora and the other cubs had adapted remarkably to their situation. Their fur now pulsed in complex patterns that Sarah recognized as tactical communications. They were sharing information about the hunters' movements, using their biological sonar in ways that surpassed her most sophisticated equipment. Multiple contacts approaching, her suit's systems warned. Detecting energy weapon signatures. Sarah checked her oxygen reserves. The next phase of her plan would be risky, but she'd learned something crucial about Mars during her years of research. The planet itself could be the greatest ally or the deadliest enemy. It all depended on how well you understood its secrets. "Remember what I said about chemistry?" she called out, her voice echoing through the tunnels. "Here's another lesson, about pressure differentials." She released a calculated burst of oxygen near a mineral vein she'd previously identified. The reaction was immediate and violent. The minerals expanded explosively, creating a chain reaction that raced through the tunnel network. The hunters' curses translated into her comm system as they scrambled to avoid the crystalline growth. But Sarah wasn't finished. She'd spent years mapping these caves not just as a scientist, but as someone who understood the value of knowing every escape route. Now, that knowledge became a weapon. "Warning," her suit's AI announced. "Detecting multiple breaches in the cave system. Atmospheric integrity compromised." Perfect. The hunters had sealed their own fate the moment they started using explosives. Mars' thin atmosphere and the cave's delicate balance were about to become their worst nightmare. The cubs pressed closer to her, their fur rippling with patterns that seemed to match the cave's vibrations. They weren't just hiding anymore, they were actively participating in their defense, using their biological abilities in concert with her plans. Suddenly, Aurora's fur flashed a warning pattern. Through the cubs' sonar mapping, Sarah saw what had alarmed them. The hunters weren't just trying to find them anymore. They were setting up some sort of energy containment field, trying to trap them in a section of the cave. "They never learn," Sarah muttered. She reached for her emergency kit, pulling out a device she'd modified for studying gas compositions. With a few quick adjustments, it became something else entirely, a trigger for the trap she'd been setting up since they entered the caves. The hunters' heavy footsteps echoed closer. "Surrender the cubs," a harsh voice demanded in galactic standard. "You cannot escape. The hunt always ends in our favor." Sarah's response was to activate her modified device. The effect was immediate and devastating. The carefully released oxygen had been seeping into the cave's mineral structure, creating microscopic pressure points. When she triggered the device, those pressure points became fault lines. The cave system groaned as ancient rock shifted and cracked. The hunters' energy containment field flickered and died as the very ground beneath their feet became unstable. Sarah had turned their pursuit into a desperate scramble for survival. "Fun fact about human scientists," she called out as chaos erupted around them. "We don't just study things, we learn how to use them." The cubs' collective sonar showed the hunters retreating, their formation broken by falling rock and explosive decompressions. But Sarah knew they wouldn't give up easily. She needed to get the cubs to the surface before the hunters could regroup. Aurora suddenly tugged at her suit, its fur creating a pattern she'd never seen before. The other cubs joined in, their combined bioluminescence forming what looked like a map, but not of the caves. They were showing her something else, something in orbit. "A rescue ship," she whispered, understanding dawning. "Your people are coming." The cubs' fur pulsed with confirmation. Their species' ships must have detected the distress signals from the crashed vessel. But they would be walking into a trap. The hunters had a warship in orbit, waiting to ambush any would-be rescuers. Sarah checked her tablet. Her emergency beacon was still transmitting, and now she understood why the hunters were becoming more desperate. It wasn't just Earth forces they were worried about, it was the arrival of the Cubs people, who would bring evidence of the hunters' crimes to the Galactic Council. "Time for the final lesson," she announced, her voice carrying through the tunnels. "Never underestimate a human protecting children, any children." She activated the last of her modified devices, triggering a cascade of reactions throughout the cave system. The hunters had thought they were dealing with a simple scientist. They were about to learn why humans had survived everything their hostile universe had thrown at them. The cubs gathered close, their fur now pulsing with patterns that matched her heartbeat. They weren't just survivors anymore, they were a family. And Sarah Chin was about to show the galaxy why threatening a human's family was the last mistake these hunters would ever make. The Martian sky burned red as Sarah led her small family toward the surface. Behind them, the cave system had become a maze of collapsed tunnels and crystalline barriers, a testament to human ingenuity and desperation. The cubs moved in perfect sync with her, their fur now displaying complex patterns that matched their surroundings, providing natural camouflage. Multiple ships detected entering orbit, her suit's AI reported. Identifying 3 distinct classes: Drachnid warship, Valaxian rescue vessels, and Earth Defense Fleet. Sarah felt a surge of pride. Her emergency beacon hadn't just reached Mars outposts, it had brought the full might of humanity's space forces. The hunters were about to learn why threatening children in human space was considered an act of suicidal stupidity. Aurora suddenly froze, its fur flashing urgent warning patterns. The other cubs immediately went dark, their biological sonar detecting something Sarah's instruments hadn't yet registered. Moments later, her suit's sensors caught up. Multiple drop pods were entering the atmosphere. The hunters were calling in reinforcements. "They're desperate," she told the cubs, her voice calm despite the danger. And desperate hunters make mistakes. She activated her long-range communicator, hoping Earth's fleet could receive her transmission through Mars' atmospheric interference. "This is Dr. Sarah Chin, requesting immediate assistance. I have 4 Valaxian cubs under my protection. The Drachnid hunters have violated multiple Galactic Council treaties. Request containment protocols." The response came in clear and strong. "Dr. Chin, this is Admiral Santos of the EDF Hyperion. Protection protocols engaged. Hold your position." Above them, the Martian sky erupted in light as Earth's defense ships engaged the Drachnid warship. The hunters had expected to face a single scientist. Instead, they were confronting humanity's full defensive capabilities. But Sarah knew the real battle would be on the ground. The hunters wouldn't abandon their prey easily, not when capturing Valaxian cubs could make them wealthy beyond imagination. She needed one final strategy, one last demonstration of why humans were considered the galaxy's most unpredictable species. "Remember what I said about pressure differentials?" she called out as hunter drop pods landed around their position. "Want to see what happens when you combine that with Martian dust storms?" She activated her last modified device, a piece of equipment originally designed for studying Mars' atmospheric composition. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The fine Martian dust, charged by the device's electromagnetic pulse, became a swirling vortex of red particles that interfered with the hunters' sensors and energy weapons. The cubs added their own defense, their collective bioluminescence creating patterns that seemed to bend light around them. Combined with the dust storm, it made them nearly invisible to both electronic and organic detection methods. "Impossible," one of the hunters growled through the universal translator. "No primitive species should be capable of this level of adaptation." Sarah laughed, the sound carrying through her suit speakers. "That's humanity's secret. We're not primitive. We're just really, really good at using whatever we have available." The sky above them lit up again as Earth's fleet engaged the Drachnid ships. But something else was happening. The Valaxian rescue ships were implementing their own strategy. Beams of pure energy cut through Mars' atmosphere, not weapons, but some form of communication. The cubs responded immediately, their fur creating patterns that pulsed in harmony with the energy beams. They were talking to their people, Sarah realized, sharing everything that had happened. Every crime the hunters had committed was being transmitted directly to the Galactic Council. "This hunt is over," Admiral Santos' voice boomed across all frequencies. "By authority of Earth Defense and the Galactic Council, all Drachnid forces are ordered to stand down." The hunters, realizing their position was compromised, made one final, desperate attempt. They charged toward Sarah and the Cubs, energy weapons blazing. But they'd forgotten something crucial about Mars. Its dust storms weren't just inconveniences. In the right conditions, with the right catalyst, they could become conductors. Sarah triggered her device's final sequence. The charged particles in the air became a network of electrical discharges, overwhelming the hunters' energy weapons and armor systems. One by one, their systems failed, leaving them helpless in Mars' hostile environment. Aurora pressed against her side, its fur now pulsing with patterns she recognized as triumph. The other Cubs joined in, their collective bioluminescence creating a display that rivaled Mars' legendary sunsets. They weren't just survivors anymore, they were witnesses to a new chapter in galactic law. Above them, Earth's ships had surrounded the Drachnid vessel, while Valaxian rescue ships descended through the atmosphere. The hunters' reign of terror was over, ended not by superior weapons or technology, but by a human scientist who understood that true strength came from protecting others. "Dr. Chin," Admiral Santos' voice came through again. "The Valaxian High Council requests immediate contact. It seems you've done more than save these Cubs. You've helped expose a criminal enterprise that's plagued the galaxy for centuries." Sarah looked at the Cubs, their fur now shimmering with patterns of joy and security. They had trusted her, adapted with her, fought beside her. In doing so, they'd helped prove something she'd always believed, that intelligence, compassion, and the drive to protect transcended species. The hunters were being rounded up by Earth's forces, their weapons and armor useless against the combination of human ingenuity and Martian environmental conditions. But Sarah wasn't watching them. Her attention was on the approaching Valaxian ships, their organic designs a stark contrast to the angular human vessels. It was time for the Cubs to return to their people. But as Aurora pressed against her one last time, its fur creating patterns she now recognized as family, Sarah knew this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something new, a demonstration to the galaxy that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their weapons or technology, but in their unwavering drive to protect those who needed protection. The Valaxian diplomatic chamber aboard the Earth Defense Fleet's flagship Hyperion glowed with soft bioluminescence. Sarah stood before the combined council of Earth and Valaxian representatives, the Cubs still clustered protectively around her legs. After everything they'd been through, they refused to leave her side until their case was officially resolved. Dr. Sarah Chin, the Valaxian High Elder's fur pulsed with formal patterns as their words translated through the ship's systems. "You have done more than save our children. You have exposed a darkness that has plagued our galaxy for generations." Through the chamber's massive viewport, Mars hung like a red jewel. The Drachnid hunter's ship was now under Earth military control, its databases revealing centuries of illegal hunting operations targeting vulnerable species throughout the galaxy. The evidence would be enough to dismantle their entire organization. "I did what any human would do," Sarah responded, feeling Aurora press closer to her side. "We protect children, all children. It's not just our duty, it's who we are." The Earth ambassador, Admiral Santos, stepped forward. "The Galactic Council has reviewed the evidence. The Drachnid hunters will face justice for their crimes. But more importantly, your actions have led to something unprecedented." The Valaxian High Elder's fur-created pattern Sarah now recognized as pride and gratitude. "We propose a new initiative, the Interstellar Protection Protocol, a joint program between Earth and Valaxia, dedicated to safeguarding vulnerable species throughout known space." Sarah felt her breath catch. The Cubs' fur pulsed with excitement, creating aurora-like displays that reflected off the chamber's walls. They understood the significance of this moment, how their ordeal had led to something that would protect countless others. Moreover, the Earth ambassador continued, "We'd like you, Dr. Chin, to head this initiative. Your unique combination of scientific knowledge and protective instincts makes you the ideal candidate to bridge our species. Aurora's fur suddenly created a pattern Sarah had never seen before, a complex swirl of colors that the translator interpreted as guardian of futures. The other cubs joined in, their collective bioluminescence creating a display that moved many in the chamber to tears. "The cubs have given you a title," the High Elder explained, their own fur pulsing with emotion. "In our culture, such names are reserved for those who shape the destiny of our people. You are now officially recognized as a protector of both our species." Sarah knelt beside the cubs, feeling the warmth of their collective energy. They had taught her as much as she had protected them, about adaptation, about communication, about the universal language of compassion that transcended species boundaries. "I accept," she said, looking at both councils. "But with one condition. The initiative needs to be more than just protection. We need to understand why species like the drachnid turned to hunting. Prevention is as important as defense." The councils murmured in agreement. This was why humans had earned their place in galactic society, not just for their ability to fight, but for their drive to understand, to solve problems at their root. "There's something else," the High Elder added, their fur creating patterns of formal ceremony. "The cubs, they've formed a bond with you that our scientists have never seen before. They've adapted some of your neural patterns, creating a bridge between our species that could revolutionize interstellar communication." Sarah wasn't surprised. She'd noticed how the cubs' fur patterns had become more complex, more nuanced during their time together. They hadn't just been hiding or communicating, they'd been evolving, adapting, creating new ways to bridge the gap between their species. "The galaxy is changing," Admiral Santos observed. "The old barriers between species are falling. Perhaps it took a human protecting alien cubs to show us that our differences are less important than what we share." Aurora pressed against Sarah's side one last time, its fur creating a pattern that needed no translation. Love, trust, family. The other cubs joined in, their collective bioluminescence forming a promise. They would see each other again, not as different species, but as pioneers of a new way of understanding. As Sarah looked out at Mars, where her scientific curiosity had led to an adventure that would reshape galactic society, she smiled. Humanity had proven itself not through force of arms, but through force of heart. The galaxy had witnessed what happened when someone threatened children under human protection, and they would never forget. "Let's get to work," she said, standing tall as both human and Valaxian representatives nodded in agreement. "We have a galaxy of children to protect." The cubs' fur pulsed with approval, their patterns now a perfect blend of human determination and Valaxian wisdom. They had started as victims of an ancient crime, but they had become something more, symbols of what was possible when species came together in defense of the innocent. And in the vastness of space, watched by representatives of Earth and Valaxia, a new chapter in galactic history began. Not with weapons or wars, but with the simple, powerful truth that had driven Sarah from the beginning, that compassion, courage, and the drive to protect new species barriers. The galaxy had witnessed true fury and found hope instead.